All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young. I'm joined by Alyssa Merrill from flowerandtonic.com, and we're so happy to be joined by Dr. John McKay, who is he spent some time at Vermont when he was an undergrad, but he is out in California now, and he's one of the foremost authorities in this whole analytical testing and extraction process, and another one of these scientists that talks at a level that is so far above my pay grade, not that that's very high anyway, but I certainly enjoy talking to people like that. And Dr. John McKay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. It's good to see everyone back there, but it's a little disheartening to have to watch football recently.
Well, hang on a second. You opened the door. You know I'm a former sportscaster, so does this mean you are a New England sports fan?
Yeah, so I grew up in Vermont, so I was heavily invested into the Montreal, Expos.
Or the Alouettes.
And then, no, not so much. And then, of course, the Red Sox. So I've been keeping stats on the Red Sox since I was third grade. So, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. No, it has been a difficult, it's been difficult on all of us just walking around the world these days with,
yes.
We've never had to go through a pandemic like we have right now. I don't know if you heard the news, but Governor Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts has rolled it back a little bit, and now gatherings have to be under 10 people, which will certainly affect everybody's Thanksgiving Day plans too. So we're not over this yet. In fact, I think we're right in the middle of the big second peak. So it is what it is. But I do want to ask you a little bit about where we are right now as a nation, because as you know, as everyone knows, within the next 48 hours or so, we'll have an election process. It's been ongoing now for a couple of weeks with mail-in votes or bring your ballot to the ballot box vote procedure. And there is definitely a distinction between the two sides here, at least on the presidential side. And I just wonder if the polls are correct and we move forward and the Democrats do take over, not just the presidency, but also the Senate, there seems to be a more solid movement for cannabis decriminalization as part of the platform. How is that going to have a trickle-down effect on everybody who's in the business now, who's just dying to either do banking or even do more research right off the top?
So number one is banking. And so that is the more difficult part because it's a cash-based business, and that breeds in its own right any type of movement that happens, not accountability. But I think one of the things that happens here is that I've been an advocate all through the parts of this is to set the boundaries, because we now have a market that the cart is ahead of the horse. And I would say that the horse hasn't been born yet. That's how far ahead it is. So we now have a nation that's buying products at gas stations and buying products at stores, and they don't even know what it is. And there's no foundation for making sure that we have compliance and regularity, purity. Number one on my side is safety. And number two is efficacy. So even if it's not ethical, I prefer if it was safe and unethical. I'm good with that. But I'm not good with, not having efficacy. And the other part is how much is in each one of these? What's the amount that will make a change in our metabolism? Much like we were talking before, is all those different sites are here, but you have to have a certain amount to be able to have it, make a significant difference in your metabolism. And then, there's so many unknowns to this and so many boundaries around the outside that we have to find out about them. And there's a lot of stuff happening now with, people making, I know it's another chemistry talk, but they're making isomers. And they're making things that the plant did naturally make that we haven't studied. So now we have degradation products and we have changes in chemistry, and people are taking these products without any knowledge of what's going to happen short term or long term. So we need science.
Right. Oh, we not only need science, we need science teachers and experts that can go into Washington, D.C. and talk to the DEA and the FDA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture and enlighten them to what's going on with this plant, because there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on at the federal government level, as you probably know. Who's going to be responsible for this, I guess, is my question.
I do think that there's a couple things. So I have been into CFDA, DEA, USDA, and talked to them locally as well as nationally. And one of the things that I've always said, it's kind of a joke, it's a cruel joke, but a lot of the people that are in government today went to school. They didn't take chemistry, but they took political science. For me, that's the right noun, it's the wrong adjective. Because you need to have the chemistry, you need to have the physics, you need to have those boundaries and be able to translate that for our political scientists that were the liberal arts that were on the other side of the St. Lawrence campus that I didn't see that much.
But that's, I mean, that's the whole situation we're in right now with COVID too. Like, right? I mean, we're not, I mean, what am I trying to say? But aren't we, I don't know, are they looking, like, how are scientists like supposed to just step up and say, here, we know this about cannabis? Like, if you know, we were talking about a study recently that came out that was a little bit fascinating, that it's just, like, it mind boggles me that, like, where is the like communication between scientists and our government? Because it's a little alarming to think that there's so much information based on, you know, conversations that we've had, yet we just seem so far off from actually getting our hands on these products anytime soon.
Yeah, I got the new glasses without the adhesive tape in the middle, and I wear them, you know, more straight nowadays. But when you are perceived towards something like that, people believe that we're incomprehensible and that we are going to confuse things with facts. And many times I am incomprehensible. But when you go back through, it's a matter of one by one by one. So I train people on elevators, you know, McDonald's or any other type of thing where I have a one-on-one conversation with anyone and talk about the cannabinoid system and what the different products are. And you have a lot of people, but it's not just a breakdown of that. It's just that in the United States, it's illegal to be able to do that work on campus. I taught the first class at Colorado State University this last fall. I got an opportunity to be in that first class, and it's for chemistry majors. And you're not allowed to bring anything in that would violate the policy that you might be teaching students how to do something illegal. So you're only dealing with hemp, but when you talk about extraction and they can interpret it, oh, I can extract THC that way at my house or apartment, that's a fine boundary that you have to make sure that you're not crossing, because it is federally legal. And that's why often I was thinking about leaving the country, and some of my friends have left the country just to be able to do research.
And some of the best research is being done in these other countries, the same research that we could be
doing. We have some of the greatest universities and the tools and some of the greatest minds here, but Italy, Spain, Germany, Colombia, you know, Australia, New Zealand is doing it. China is doing fabulous, groundbreaking work that I look at and said, I knew that back in 2012, but now you have, you know, real studies that support it, but not in the United States.
It's interesting about the United States, though, because it's the anecdotal evidence and science that has driven the movement so far. And it's one of the reasons why I think we have a majority of our states have medicinal marijuana programs now.
Yes.
But how do we get to that next level? Is decriminalization at the federal level going to open up the doors for research more than anything else they can do?
No. And that's the part where it looks like a panacea that we just decriminalize, but you have to decriminalize in the right class. Because if you decriminalize everything, then the hemp market goes to nutraceuticals. It goes to dietary nutritional supplements. It goes to pharmaceutical, but does not go to anyone else within the industry. So you just shut down an industry and let the large companies just take over. It would be illegal it'd be like having, saying that beer is now legal, but only if you buy it from Miller, only if you buy it from Budweiser, if only you buy it from Molson. You're not allowed to have a microbrewery. You're not allowed to have, you know, your own hops. Those are the things that you have to be careful that you haven't taken this paintbrush and said, oh, everything's totally legal. Well, that's still not going to come around. that doesn't bring you the result you want. It's definitely the political scientists, that's their role.
Yeah, and I guess that it's a necessary role. I understand that, especially now. But it is amazing to me in 2020 that cannabis has become a political pawn. Believe it or not, because the one side of the aisle was attaching cannabis reform to the COVID aisle, and of course the other side, they were saying, well, there's more mentions of cannabis in here than there is jobs.
Yes.
And obviously one side got the idea that cannabis leads to jobs, and the other side just can't quite grasp that. That being said, if we do make the kind of changes that I hope we'll see in the next 48 hours, and it might take 4 months, it might take all 4 years. I have no idea. None of us seem to know what's going to happen in the next 4. It's like watching a sporting event, because you really don't know who's going to win at the end.
You really don't know who's going to win, and there could be overtime.
Oh no, we're pretty sure we're going to see some overtime, and Lord knows there'll be some video review too, I think, of this as we get to go there. One of the biggest challenges is identifying the dose. And the dose for you may be different than the dose for me, which is different going to be than the dose for Alyssa. And I'm talking about a combination of CBD and THC. I certainly accept the fact that there is an entourage effect, that THC and CBD working together, they're there in that same plant for a purpose. And then extracting those chemicals and putting them into play into humans. Every human is different. We talk about the differences in the different metabolism and how we break down things. How are we ever going to have control of a dose and titration that will be accepted? Or will we never have that?
Oh, I think you will. And remembering that when you're taking a dose of any medicine, it's what you also already have in your stomach, or what you have for metabolism. And you also have different ingredients that would counteract each other. I mean, grapefruit and some of the other plants, other medicines is counteractive. But I will refer you to something that you might do every day, and maybe you don't, and that is drink coffee. Coffee is a natural planet in my day, but a plant, and it allows you to do everything that you are doing with cannabis. I use it all the time. You grind it, you extract it. So you could extract it with acetone, which is nail polish remover. You could extract it with isopropyl alcohol. You could extract it with alcohol itself. I mean, it does a great job. You lose the first 2 hours of the day, but you're active. And then you have all these other processes, but you chose either a cold brew or a hot brew. And even a cold brew versus a hot brew has 1,500 compounds in it. A cold brew only has 1,000. And it doesn't go bad. Now, you take that same analogy over to a different variety. And one of the papers that I sent to Alyssa there was a great work out of Germany and Italy that was done that allowed them to have different varieties, and they could separate the different varieties into the individual compounds. And then they could dip it in, let's say, a magic formula that looks for oxidation, and it would show the variety that was best for that. One that would show it for inflammation, and it would show the different variety that was best for that. And when we move towards that process, that allows you as a consumer or as a manufacturer to be able to take a variety and make it something that is more applicable for inflammation, another one more applicable for mood, another one more applicable for oxidation. So you have the chemistry out there is fine. We can figure it out once someone gives us a green light to go figure it out.
So wait, so you're saying right now you literally, gonna back up a tiny bit, like you can take this plant that you're growing and then test it to know exactly what it will be best to treat, like what condition it's gonna treat best?
Well, the scientist would, yes.
The scientist would, yeah, not you. I mean, yes.
Not you.
Maybe. Maybe.
No, not you. No.
But but it's different than so right now, if we're looking at a COA, we're looking at certain terpenes. So John was the one, and I've repeated this story, the very basics that I can't believe I didn't know the first year I was in this industry, but Dr. Russo study that terpenes are the driver. They're right, that they drive the effect.
They steer as a bike, they're the front wheel.
Right.
Okay.
They steer the experience. The back wheel is the cannabinoids. That's the power.
Okay.
Generally.
That's a great analogy. Thank you for that.
Really good at analogies. That's how we communicate, because I don't understand a whole lot. But, and I don't want, we want to be able to then communicate this to people who are then, like a regular consumer or a patient, because it is so hard.
Yes.
It's so aggravating when you're talking to people who still say, well, like cannabis in they use it in such a general way. And it's just so frustrating because, as one can make you, hyper and overactive, and one can make you fall asleep on the couch. And it's just, people don't
not move and not want to move, even if you are awake.
Exactly. So, and then that comes down to, with your specialty, which is the extraction process.
Yes. So I like to call it concentration.
Okay.
And the reason I say concentration is because there's extraction, and that's a liquid or a liquid solid, where your coffee, and the separation doesn't have anything to do with a liquid. If you were to squeeze a cannabis plant, a fresh cannabis plant, it will squeeze out what they call rosin. Mm-hmm. And so you would take that out. That's not an extraction. That's a separation. You can take cannabis, put it in dry ice, shake it all apart, and all the trichomes fall off, all the nice, little brown, all clear balls, and that's the separation. But an extraction would be ethanol, heptane, hexane, CO2, propane, butane. So you're using a liquid to be able to solubilize it and then move it out, just as you're using water in your coffee. Now, there's a reason why you grind beans, Jimmy. There's a reason why you don't just take them out of the fridge and just throw a bunch of beans in there, do you? Well, no. Maybe you do. I shouldn't say that.
No, I don't.
So as a side note, I grew up with Bob LaBelle in my year up in Burlington, Vermont, listening to him doing high school games. One of my favorite people. So anyhow, back to the subject.
Too.
Really?
By the way, I go back to 1978 with Bob LaBelle.
Oh.
I worked at Channel 4 in Boston when he first started there.
Oh, when he came down from Burlington. Wow,
Bob, I consider Bob a friend, and we've been to a lot of events together, let's just say.
Yeah. So when I went back through, I grind the coffee bean to give more mass. That's why you grind it. You grind it to increase your surface area.
Okay.
And when you grind it into a finer and finer, that becomes a different product, because now you have to use some pressure to do your espresso, right? But it's because your coffee is ground so fine that the water is not getting through. That's the exact same thing with cannabis. It is the exact same thing. You're not going to die, but you are going to enjoy it.
Now here's and I use caffeine all the time when I talk to parents or when it comes down to somebody who needs to learn a little bit about the product. You go a day without caffeine and you get yourself a headache. You go a day without cannabis, you don't really have any physical effect for the most part.
Correct.
How powerful an anecdotal story is that when you're trying to explain to people about the benefits of the plant versus something that we all take for granted? We take a cup of coffee every morning.
Caffeine is addictive. And so I used to have an abbreviation for the caffeine, and I've already forgotten it and stuff. So that's obviously I didn't do well with that one. But caffeine, opiates, those are because your brain now needs them. It now needs them. And when it doesn't have them, it's going back through going, I'm sorry, but I'm really missing this molecule. And you're not missing a cannabinoid unless you're using it for, if it's part of your endocannabinoid, just like we were talking about vitamin D or DHA, because you're low on those, you might need them to get you to a level, but you're not addicted to it. You might have a habit. Habits are different from addiction.
So I use the word optimized. So you would feel optimized maybe if your cannabinoid levels are a little higher, if they're lower. Okay. And you'll just function at a potential.
And eventually your body just takes over and says, I know what I'm doing now. I'm okay.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it will.
I want to ask Dr. McKay, if you were the czar, if you had the FDA, the DEA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture all in a room, and it was up to you to decide the amount of CBD in different products and who should be in charge of X and who should be in charge of Y, or THC or CBD in this case, how would you structure a regulatory government, I guess, for this new industry?
So I believe that a lot of the things that are outside of science become about money. And they become about, how do I squeeze as much cannabinoid out of that plant, and how do I squeeze even more money out of that plant? So part of it is, in the beginning, being able to have something that allows you to have tax dollars that supports what you're trying to do. So the state of Vermont, they're now legalized it, right?
Yep.
And you could have them all in the same room. They don't have the money to be able to enforce the regulations they put in place. There are only 650,000 people there.
Right.
And most of them, don't have any interest in this. And so when you do that, if I had them in a room, then I would move towards first a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So it wouldn't be an all-in-one. It would be a czaration of my ideas. And so my czaration would be a phase 1 of making sure that we have things safe. That's my very first thing. Safe, safe, safe. Number 2 is efficacy. So now you move to efficacy, would be, what kind of boundaries would you have? In coffee, right? You have a boundary that people don't put 200 milligrams of caffeine into a product. And you don't have pure caffeine, you die from pure caffeine. And so now you have regulatory around that. You have boundaries and say, this boundary is for this. I would also do that. So now you ask me my opinion. Now I am czar. So when I go back through, I would say that I have to have this much of the cannabinoid in this product, and this is what it will do. And so when you have that boundary, you now have that. You also bring it through agriculture, I believe, in our schools. So Cornell and UC Davis and Colorado State, and you look at our I'm sure I've left out someone who's going, oh, but we're a good ag school. What happened to us? And so if you go back through, you look at that, because they understand how to make a plant and how to make it safe and how to make it for something that we don't have. That doesn't mean that you have the other parts. The other thing I would do is limit the making of other compounds from it. There are compounds out there that they're making from they can make THC out of CBDA very easily. And you can make Delta 8 and you can make Delta 9, and there's other isomers. And that's where flumitamide, what you and I knew about in the early 50s with all the terrible birth defects, that's what the safety comes. We haven't tested all of the compounds that people are making. So you can catalog those. So my phase 1 is safety, and it includes those. Number 2 is efficacy. Number 3 is economics. You need to have it economically viable for companies to continue to provide good products for people, as well as the government, because in our government, we have to, fund the universities. So that's my czar relation, Jimmy.
I would totally vote for you for that role. The one thing everyone could probably agree on is that just makes sense. Everything you just said is scientific and it makes sense. And I'm so grateful, because John's one of the people I go to when I'm looking at products, and it starts with extraction, but there are so many layers to it, and you kind of hit them all. So thank you for your.
I got one more new molecule, and it comes from our chat room. They want me to ask you about Thc V. What is that? So
on one side of the molecule, there's I know that you love the chemistry, so I know how deeply you're into this one. So if you draw a hexagon and you draw that on one side of one of those little pointy things, there's 5 carbons. And when you have 3 carbons, that's Thc V. So so you have one with 5 carbons, a little tail at the end, and the other one has a shorter tail. And so because of those, actually in Boston, Dr. Alexandros Makrionis over at BU has developed most of these things. He's one of my #1 experts in the entire world. And so when you look at that, he's found that the longer that carbon chain is, that from 3 to 5 to 7, the more bioavailable it comes into our body. It's easier for it to come into our body and has a very similar activity. So you have bioavailability, that's what can get into your body, and you have bioactivity, that's what it does when it gets in there. So that's what it is. And so it has very different things, different chemical characteristics as far as what it does versus THC.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. That's
that
your
was
chemistry
great.
lesson.
And that's the kind of thing we love to do here is we get some questions on chat and we throw them out there and we get some feedback and everybody goes home happy. And it is that engagement process that we are trying to bring to the public so that we can continue to educate them about this plant and the benefits of it and how it works both internally and externally. So Dr. John McKay, you have been awesome. And by the way, Alyssa has my number. If you ever want to talk sports, I got no problem spending some time on the phone with you talking about sports.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that the LA winning the Boston Red Sox Annex team, as I call it now. So
yeah, that's right. Because of Mookie. That's right. Because of Mookie. Hey, look, it's been a strange year in so many ways, and sports is just another, microcosm of what's going on in the world anyway.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating, and of course tonight, that other guy that left town recently,
the other
number
guy.
12. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the big guy that catches the ball, not him.
No, I'm talking about Tom Brady, not Gronk. They'll both be in action tonight. We'll watch it and feel sick if you're a Patriots fan. But anyway.
Wait, well, if the Giants upset them again, I can't handle that.
That is not going to happen. I'm going to tell you that right now, sir.
Yeah, we said that in the last Super Bowl, too.
I did not say that in the last time we played them. But anyway, that's okay. Hey, great talking with you. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
And how about, where can we find more about Dr. John McKay? I know you're all over the internet. I Googled you and you come up like a million times.
You have a lecture that people can check out. Is that correct? If you want a little education on extraction.
Yeah, you just go to, I guess, again, the LinkedIn, but I have like 5 or 6 videos out there, and I do live classes on extraction, which are just 5 hours of this, really.
Well, sir, I'll tell you, it's entertaining, and I'm fascinated with the whole subject matter and everything. And if I ever do have time to do that, I'll take good notes, I promise. But again,
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And you got to realize one more thing, John. For years I interviewed all the same people Bob Lobel did, and now the both of us are talking to scientists and doctors. I think it's pretty funny. In so many ways, but great to talk with you. And anytime I can mention, pick up the phone and call Bob just to bring him up to date. I got an excuse now, so thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
All right, bye.